Yeah, I'm not going to play these games. How do you define a protest? How do you define a riot? A riot is violent unrest. A protest is peaceful unrest. I think it's fair to point out there may be an overlap. We don't want to call a protest where there's some scuffling a violent riot or anything like that, but it's going to be up to you, I guess. Let's just say that what happened last night in New York City was on the very edge of being a riot. When you have people who are marching through the streets and fighting with cops, I think at the low level you can call it a riot. It's tough. The left would call it a protest, but the left called when the mainstream media called burning down a police station a peaceful protest. If that's the game y'all are playing, fine. Any degree of violence, and I'm just calling it a riot. But to be fair, when you have an extended degree of violence, then I'll call it a riot. Meaning, if there's a protest and one guy acts a fool, okay, it's a protest, come on. But when you have multiple people being arrested, jumping on train tracks and other nonsense, just gonna call it a riot, not a protest. And that's what we're looking at. From the Daily Mail, protests over Jordan Neely's subway death turned violent near Broadway Lafayette Station as a bloodied demonstrator is led away by the NYPD. The left, of course, will blame the police for all of this. But I think when you look at the videos, nah, I'm not playing that game. I've been to a lot of places across the country. I've been to a lot of protests and I've been to a lot of riots. And what you see in New York is that the police typically do not act out to a degree that we see in other places. So in New York City, even when I've seen agitators throw rocks and bottles, the cops don't put on heavy armor. The cops don't fire tear gas. They typically just corral and arrest people. That's what you see in New York when people begin rioting. Now in California, when people even march down the street, cops show up with bean bags and LRADs. LRAD is long-range acoustic device. We don't necessarily call those protests, but the left would blame the police, saying the police are the ones being violent. In New York, nah, it's just aggressive. Don't get me wrong, you had that moment from Occupy Wall Street where the cops pepper sprayed those girls for no reason. Yeah, that's on the cops. But this, if you want to play the game where you're going to call burning down a police station a peaceful protest, then I have no problem saying that when you get violent to any degree in more than one circumstance, like it is the body itself, y'all are in a riot. Now, we have this story from last night. We have a bunch of updates. You may have heard that new videos emerged proving that Daniel Penny, the ex-Marine who put Jordan Neely in a chokehold, new video shows he was trying to save this man. I'm not hearing anything from Ocasio-Cortez. You know, she's calling for this guy to be indicted, charged. Protesters want criminal charges. AOC called it a public murder. But now that new footage has emerged showing that he and two others were actually attempting to save the life of homeless man Jordan Neely, she's been awfully quiet. Because it's going to be really, really hard to lose this one. So this is what AOC does. She peeks around the corner, sees something that people are saying, and just regurgitates it. And in the moment she's like, oh, this is no longer a good investment, she's out. Here's the funny story. Yesterday, while these protesters were basically losing their minds, we had NYPD's Strategic Response Group standing by in the subway as Jordan Neely protesters chant and crowd the platform, trying to avoid a repeat of what happened on Saturday. Oh my God. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a man jumping up and down on the third rail. Do you know what the third rail is? It is the electrified track that the train attaches to so that it has energy. All right, look at this. Let me just play this video for you and you can see for yourself. Look at this guy. Get off, get off. This guy was inches away. Look at, oh my God. I watched that. Even other protesters are like, get off, get off. This dude was literally inches away from bursting into flames. Probably just eat. I think what happens when you touch it, you get blasted off of it. I'm not sure. Look how stupid these people are. All jumping up and down on the train tracks. Chanting Jordan Neely. I'm sorry. This is just societal collapse and cultural decay. There's a train coming and there are people standing on the train tracks. Okay. Yeah, sure. Look, I'm not going to live in this place. You have people murdered on the trains and these people don't protest. Why? It's a sickness. It is. And so here's Timcast News on Twitter. Follow at Timcast News. We have a bunch of videos from the night in question from the other day when these people were getting violent. And the police are desperately trying to stop people from dying. Amazing. Whatever, man. You know what I think? I think the cops should back off. I have more disdain for the police than I do the protesters. And don't get me wrong, I think the protesters are destroying the fabric of the city. But these cops are the ones that are actually perpetuating it. No, I mean it. Yo, these people, with or without the cops, jumped onto the train tracks. Well, what are you going to do? If people are going to do it, they're going to do it. And we're getting to the point where I think it's important to point out there's not enough police to stop this. And the only thing that actually stops us is a return to personal responsibility. We go back to a time where if you decided to jump on the third rail, I mean, we're going to try and stop you. Don't get me wrong. The cops are trying to prevent it from happening. But if a giant mob rushes the third rail, like, what are you going to do? Stop allocating money. This is ridiculous. This is what happens. These people who are so dumb, they would jump up and down on the electrified third rail with people going like, stop, stop. At a certain point, you got to stop holding hands. At a certain point, you have to stop defending the people who set fire to a police station. Stop calling it a peaceful protest. You know what? It's a cult. It is outright a cult, period. And the cult exists on social media, and they're trying to recruit others. But I do think that they're losing to a great degree. Granted, they've grown a tremendous mass. This cancerous bulge in our culture, where you have people with no principles, no morals, no positions other than, for some reason, they jumped onto the train tracks. Okay, I'm sorry. I've been in a lot of protests. I have seen people strategically, drop a banner, block a roadway, and get press coverage. It works for them. But to be at the point where a large mob of individuals jump onto the train tracks, I'm just like, yo, idiocracy is here. A lot of people are calling it, Darwin Awards and stuff like that. It's just like, what are we going to do? Are we going to put floaties on everybody in case they walk into the water or fall into the river in New York City? Do we got to put up big glass barriers like they do in Japan? I think it's Japan. When you go to the train, there's a bunch of countries that do this. You can't actually get onto the tracks. There's a big, thick glass barrier. I think they do this in Thailand and Korea. The train stops. The subway car doors open and then big glass doors open. And then you walk in at an angle. There's like arrows on the ground. Is that what we're going to do? Or do we just recognize there's got to be some degree of personal responsibility? Now, I suppose the problem is who's going to clean up all the corpses of the individuals who jumped onto a train track and then, got slammed into by the train or electrocuted? That's going to be the people. But I don't understand how a civilization can survive if we're at this point, right? There has to be some cutoff, right? Where, here's what I'm saying. If somebody chooses as an individual to jump onto the trains, we must stop them, save their life. If a crowd of people are building a culture around jumping in front of cars and onto train tracks, I don't know what we can do. Do we just say, okay, we're going to put rubber bumpers on everything? Are we going to is every car going to be a bumper car now? Are we going to get to the point of idiocracy where we try to idiot-proof everything, or like Wall-E, where morbidly obese people sit in hover chairs just drinking Slurpees all day? I don't think this is good for society. And I don't think we can save the lives of every single person who's trying to jump onto train tracks. This is not me saying that any harm should befall these people. I'm saying the opposite. I'm just saying, how do we actually deal with that? What do you do? We cannot allocate resources to this. Does every street have barriers to prevent jaywalking? It's just, you cannot it's impossible to prevent stupid people from jumping on train tracks. For the most part. It's sad. But I just feel like if we keep going in this direction, eventually the system just breaks down. Protest over Jordan Neely's subway death turned violent near Broadway. The Daily Mail says Neely's death was ruled a homicide last week. On Monday, demonstrators calling for justice for Neely took to the streets once again, rallying near the Broadway Lafayette station in Lower Manhattan where Neely was killed. Now, you may notice there's no images here because as per YouTube rules, I cannot show the violence that the left was engaged in, so can't show it on YouTube. But there were many individuals who were arrested in violent scuffles. That's why I say, it's a riot. A well-known photographer, Stephanie Keith, whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Reuters, and Getty, was detained. I would like to point out, however, I don't know about Stephanie Keith specifically. I'm vaguely familiar with Stephanie Keith. I think I know who that is. These are leftists. They're protesters. They show up. They pretend like they're there to be objective observers, but they typically only produce images that are beneficial to the left. I don't know about Stephanie Keith specifically. The act of journalism is allowed. The biases in media is allowed. But I'm just pointing out, in New York, when you get someone like Elad Eliyahu, who reports for Timcast.com, they physically attack him. Stephanie Keith does not get physically attacked. So it makes you wonder what the priorities of these individuals are. If the leftist mob is going to allow this person, but physically assault that person, you get it. You get it, right? I don't trust these quote unquote journalists. One protester was seen being wrestled to the ground with blood pouring from a wound on his head. Several more were pushed to the floor. The NYPD has had to confirm how many arrests were made when asked by thedailymail.com. Eric Adams, a former NYPD officer who, like Neely, is black. Daily Mail, you pathetic. That's such a, oh my God. The mayor who, like the man died, happens to be, yes, there are a lot of people who are black that live in big cities. That may be surprising to you guys. Has called for restraint, urging protesters to give the Manhattan DA's office time to investigate fully. AOC, a congresswoman representing part of New York, has called Neely's death a public execution. Yeah, well, as we know, in fact, Daniel Penny and two other men actually tried to save the life of Jordan Neely. But when you live in a psychotic leftist cult reality, that don't matter. It doesn't matter. I warned you all, and I'm warning you again. And everybody who says it's too hard, you're allowed to say it. It's allowed. You're allowed to. It's life. Okay, it's hard. Stay in this city. Stay in this city. You know what I don't take kindly to is this. Fundraiser launched for former Marine Daniel Penny's legal defense. I'm of two thoughts on this. This man lives behind enemy lines, and he tried to save people. And for that, he is deserving of our support. We cannot just abandon these cities to the far left. But then part of me says, are we too far gone at this point? I mean, these people are jumping on the third rail up and down. I'm just looking at this guy like, oh my God. The guy was jumping up and down on the third rail. Wow. When you're in Chicago, they have the third rail as well. And there's a sign and it says like, do not touch this rail. And there's a picture of a little man touching it. There's like an explosion coming off his foot. I don't know exactly what, I think it'll blast you off of it. I'm not sure. That's what they say. You'll touch it and it'll just fry you. And then you'll probably die instantly or something like that. And this guy's jumping up and down. And I'm just like, that is who we're supposed to defend? Wow. Man, we've fallen. We have fallen as a society. We're at that point. Don't get me wrong. Stupid people have existed throughout history. But we just have too many. And like, how do we function if these people are voting? Seriously. Now, Daniel Penny needs, I shouldn't say wants, because I don't know if he's asked for it, legal defense money. And we have a Give, Send, Go, which is raising money for him. The campaign launched as so far as raised $2,200 at the time of publishing. I believe currently it's at around $10,000, $10,830. Let's refresh, see if it's gone up at all. And it's now at $11,010. I'm getting to the point where I'm just going to say no to this. Okay. It's tough. This guy's behind enemy lines. He lives in this place. I've not heard his statement. I don't know what was going on, but I don't trust the people that still live in these cities. I just don't. I really, really don't. If you live in New York after years of this stuff, and now you want me to contribute to your legal fund, I can't do it. I think this man is deserving of legal defense. I believe he is a good guy who did the right thing, tried to subdue a violent man, and then actually tried to save his life. That is honorable and admirable. And as a former Marine, I have tremendous respect for his service. Seems like a really good dude. But at a certain point, I gotta just say no. You know why? I view, at this point, you living in New York no different than jumping up and down on the third rail. Maybe it's a little bit too extreme, but I view it similarly. You cannot be in a city where you know you will go to prison. It was 4 years ago I talked about this. You will do something that is typically is the right thing to do, but in anarcho tyranny, they will come after you. And what are we supposed to? We got to pay the bill for that now. If you jump on the third rail, up and down, and then you get blasted off of it, yeah, I'm not going to pay your medical bills, dude. I'm just going to be like, it's a sad reality that people are this ignorant. If you live in New York City and this happens to you, at a certain point, I'm like, bro, you're in a burning building and you didn't pay attention. I just cannot. We cannot be a society that props up people who are unwilling to do the bare minimum. I'm sorry. That's just where I'm at. Like I said, this seems like a really good dude, but I'm not going to contribute to this. And I've contributed to quite a bit, but not this one. I won't do it. I got out of New York City a long time ago. And it's fair to say that I've got my ear to the ground and getting out. Look, I probably never should have gone. A black supremacist executed 2 police on my street. I look out the window. There's the car. There's the bodies. Crazy. The cops told me I wasn't allowed to leave my house. Yeah, right. They tried to stop me. Fat load of good that did. I just walked out. I waited for them to leave and went outside. I'm like, you're not keeping me locked in my apartment. Get out of here. But at that point, I was just like, I don't want to be here. I can see what's happening. And there are too many people who are like, it's no big deal. It doesn't happen all that often. This could be you. That could be you. And you come to me and you say this. You say, it's too hard. I can't move. I don't have a job. I get it. Absolutely, totally fine. When they try to lock you up and throw away the key, I will remind you that this is what you said. This is easier for you. Okay? All right? Fair point. I'm not you. I don't know your life. Now, I am of the opinion that what is happening to this man, Daniel Penny, is substantially more difficult than it would have been to just leave the city. A young man, he could have just left New York City. But he chose this. I am not going to rag on that. I'm just not going to pay the bill for someone who stuck their hand onto an electric stove and held it there. That's how I feel. You may disagree. You're allowed to. I was living in New York. I felt the burn from the stove and I said, probably shouldn't do that again. Moved to the Jersey side. The heat started emanating and getting worse. The bombs were planted in Jersey and in Manhattan. I said, I don't want to be here because these people are nuts. It was the protests, really. And I'm just like, man, moved to I was in Union City, just across the river, right by the Lincoln Tunnel. And then I moved to Bayonne, which is still in the New York Metro. Because I was like, I'm going to get away and get outside of the city where you're less likely to. It's still dense. And then with everything going on in the protests, I said, maybe it's just better to stay away from the New York Metro outright. But find bigger property, find something better. So I went to South Jersey on the other side of Philly. I said, there's still a big city. I can still get access. And then there was like a standoff and a shooting. The riots crossed the bridge. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm out. Now I'm in MAGA country. West Virginia, tri-state area. And I ain't got nothing to worry about at this point. Now they're just swatting us, and lying about us in the media and stuff like that. But I feel for the most part safe here. We have security. We are armed. We have our rights. These people who live in the city, this is how I view it for Daniel Penny. He purchased a lottery ticket. Well, the chances of him winning that lottery are very, very slim. But the grand prize, life in prison. Life in prison, or maybe 15, 20 years. Who knows? He might get 5 years. I see this man being convicted. Well, maybe what'll happen is a plea bargain, but I really doubt it. Because the protesters jumping up and down in the subway, here's what will happen. Well, okay, let me put it this way. Here's my prediction, which very well may be wrong. I think there's a strong probability that the DA, someone like Alvin Bragg, is going to say this. He's a single guy. He's a young 24-year-old college student. Nobody inside the city actually cares, and they will not defend him. And we do have a bunch of protesters demanding that he be locked up, and they're causing problems. How much of a disruption was it to jump on the subway tracks? Substantial delays. How much money do we spend in overtime? Oh, it's a whole lot. It'll be cheaper and politically easier to lock this man up for the rest of his life and let him die on Rikers Island than it would be to deal with the mob. And then the jury that they'll bring in, the grand jury first is going to be like, look, just indict him. We don't want to be involved in this. And then when it comes to a jury trial, he's going to be saying, like, I tried to save him. And they're going to say, but you still murdered him. You go to prison now. He's chosen that. Why should I allocate funds to somebody who's chosen to walk into a burning building? And people say to me, Tim, it's too hard to leave the city. Fine. If you think it's easier to get locked up on Rikers Island and go to prison, then okay. I suppose the reality is this. There's a 100% chance you'll be faced with difficulty if you try and upend your life and leave the city. 100%. Very, very difficult. I get it. There is a 0.001% chance that it'll be you who is mercilessly beaten by a violent mob or locked up in prison for the rest of your life or for a few years after trying to defend yourself. So that's the gamble people are taking. I can respect that 100%. You are saying right now the risk of me being this guy is slim to none. So I'd rather just stay here. That means when it all comes crashing down, I'll say, you bought the lottery ticket. I'm not paying the bill. We'll see how this develops, but I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.